Okay. Hey guys, how's it going? I am keeping to my word as promised. Okay, so this is pretty different um, to what I'm used to. So we'll have to figure it out together. Um, sure. So what I am hoping to do with this series every weekend is to talk everything about business. Um, because I feel like there is not enough conversations happening around the founder's journey or the people investing, building, and operating um, companies and what that experience and that journey feels like. Um, and so, yes, the name of this series, I've tried to call it On the Front Line because hopefully, I guess it in my head represents what that actual experience feels like for people that are building, operating, and investing in companies, essentially. Okay. So yes, it's going to be an interesting journey. Hopefully, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Please drop the comments, join in, um, tell somebody that will tell somebody that will tell somebody, and yeah, hopefully it just becomes something that um, we get to spend 30 minutes together or more every weekend and have interesting conversations. Okay, so I was thinking actually today about what this first episode should possibly be around. And again, we're at a time where it is we're gradually coming to the end of the year. Um, and I have been speaking with a lot of friends that are business owners. And it's very, very interesting because you see people from conversations around, oh, the year being hasn't been really, really, has been a very tough year. You know, economy wise, companies are trying to figure out how they evolve their products and their offerings and just staying alive and also trying to plan what the new year will look like. And that has really, really got me thinking about um, what kind of future, especially for a lot of the guys building tech startup, what kind of future are they building for? I was telling a friend, I said, the promise of venture a few years ago was very specific. You were building a business, so you had like these different phases. You have companies, the whole premise was you have a beautiful idea, you're able to raise some family or friends of venture capital really quickly to validate the demand for that idea. So that usually be like a pre-seed round uh, or an angel round. And at your seed round, you already have seen like decent demand for the business. Again, you probably haven't found product market fit. And then you are raising additional capital to kind of deepen that market placement or that offering in the market. And by the time you get to Series A, the whole idea at that point is yes, the demand is very clear. Your unit economics is getting a lot more stronger, and then you're raising a lot more capital to kind of really, really scale up what the business is offering. And what you then usually will see happen was that in usually like 4 or 5 year timelines, those businesses ended up getting either acquired or getting ready to IPO. Now, over the last 2, 3 years, that has we've seen a significant shift in terms of what the venture promise means for a huge amount of companies, right? Where a lot of companies are getting to that point where they have raised significant amount of capital. They've tried kind of following that playbook and that pathway, but the the rules of the game have significantly changed. And what I mean is, if you look at what is happening now over the last 18 months, a huge, almost like 80-90% of venture capital has shifted from all categories of softwares to focusing predominantly on investing in AI businesses or AI opportunities. And so you then have a huge catalog of companies globally that have raised significant venture capital now that are struggling to figure out how do they keep that, how do they keep growing, right? Going public is proving difficult because justifying all of the valuations those companies um, have defined for themselves is looking very difficult to be able to claim those valuations. For a lot more of the earlier stage companies, it is difficult to be able to access additional venture capital. So most of them are either figuring two pathways: become profitable really quickly or die. And my big premise going into 2025 is that we will see a lot more companies that have, we've seen a decent amount of that happen this year, but going into 2025, we're going to see huge amount of companies shut down, either publicly or quietly. And it's just because, not necessarily that the ideas of the businesses were not fundamentally great, but again, going that venture pathway and not having the resource to keep accelerating that growth means they will hit an inflection point where it will be a case of either figure out how to be profitable really quickly, or at a certain point in time, they die. But interestingly, now there's a new crop of founders that I'm seeing and having conversations with that are asking themselves and rethinking what that pathway should be like. And then telling themselves, because again, I think we all at a certain point fell so much in love with the venture pathway without asking what are the alternatives, right? Before all of this craziness, or this super heavy focus around everybody wanting to raise venture capital, people have been building business. People still build businesses today that don't raise any money from investors, right? And so you're seeing a rethink around, do I really need to raise venture capital? You know, and if I do need to raise venture capital, at what point do I really need to raise it? Because once you get comfortable or used to the ideology of raising money to support that business growth, if you don't have that resource as you continue that pathway and that journey, then it becomes a really, really draining experience. And what I kind of ask people is this: if you're going to spend 4 years or 5 years of your life, because again, the venture match for the founder, for the investors, everybody that is playing the startup game or that is invested in that journey are all invested for very different motivations and very different reasons, right? And so if you're going to be spending 4 years, 5 years of your life building a business, you probably want to build something that you have the best outcomes for, right? Building a startup for me has been the most rewarding, the most insightful journey I could have done with my life. I could not have imagined doing anything else than building the company. It has been truly, truly, truly an experience. Most days you wake up, you are truly excited. Other days you wake up and you're like, why am I doing this? But through all of that journey, it is, for me, it has been the most remarkable experience, having to work with incredible people. Um, every day is a completely new learning experience. And so, again, the question is, if you're going to spend 4 years, 5 years of your life, yes, it's great that you get to learn all of this. But again, for whatever your motivations are, whether that motivation is because you're building the business because you want to make significant impact in the world, or you're building the business because you want to be wealthy. I remember a great Harvard Business Review article I read a few years ago about, do you want to be rich or do you want to be king? And if you're an operator, you're a founder, or you're thinking about whatever you're doing for the business, pause as you reflect going into the new year and ask yourself that question: do I want to be rich? Do I want to be king? Because how you would approach a lot of the things you will do, the pathway you will take. Um, a huge amount of that will be influenced about where do you see this business going. You know, I was giving a talk at a friend's office yesterday, and I mentioned to the team that why is it that you would find companies that have huge amount of people, they've raised they have a huge amount of money. So if you think about any company in the world, um, huge team, huge budget, but most times struggle to be the most innovative. It doesn't mean they're not actually producing innovation across different spaces, but why is that usually the case? You would assume that with more people, with more resources, that there will be a lot more ability to achieve a lot more. But instead, you will find very small. Um, Again, the whole premise of being a startup, right? And there's this core word everybody likes using in startup land called "we want to disrupt." We want to disrupt. You find this small team of people with a very narrow, focused goal, beating the larger corporation with more resource, more people, if probably even more experienced people potentially at their own business. And I realize this again is not necessarily about. It's great when you have as much resource, but a lot of the time, most times people believe that every problem, the way to solve every problem is to throw more, either more people to it or to throw more money to that problem. So again, as you're thinking about the new year, whatever, even in your personal life, where you're thinking about everything that you need to achieve, the question you should be asking yourself is, how do I achieve all of that with what I already have? Because people always believe, even in personal finance, when I used to do my series around money talk, the one belief a lot of people have in society is that I'll be a lot more happier if I have more. But time and time again, we realize that that is really not true, right? With every single time we've earned more, with every single accomplishment we've achieved, there's still that demand, there's still that belief that, oh, it will only be really, really exciting or much more fulfilling if there was more, right? Oh, I just need to get that next degree. Um, I just need to, I don't know, earn more. If I earn more, if I did this more, if I got this, then I'll be happy. But what I've learned and I realize is both as a business or as an individual is if you do not figure out how you find fulfillment already, getting more degrees or getting uh, more money or whatever that case is doesn't really change the dynamics of what that future looks like. So I'd like to hear your thoughts. How are you thinking about the end of the year? The year is coming to an end. A lot of people are planning to just eat, be merry. It's been a challenging year. For others, obviously, there's a lot of planning going on. People now are bringing out their notepads and their pens, whether for business or their personal life. I'm thinking about what are our 2025 goals and ambition and aspiration. How was 2024 for you? You know, did you achieve all of the things you set out to achieve? What are you most excited about 2025? You know, um, and what are you doing? What is one thing you are trying to do? Again, because I feel like a lot of the time we try to do too much, but maybe the way you should be thinking about it is what is the one thing I want to do differently to give me a different result in 2025? You know, what is that one mindset shift that I want to be very conscious about going into the new year? Um, yeah, I would love to hear what you're thinking. But yeah, why you again, please, um, if you can leave a comment, I would love to see what you're thinking. But why that is going on actually, for me, I think this year has been a oh, it started off being a very very challenging year. I wouldn't even lie. Um, at a certain point in time, it felt like we probably were going to shut down the business, which was a really really tough year. But just around the same time, it became a really really amazing year, you know. And I'm really really grateful for the team again, which is what I talked about. people don't talk about enough of what that journey feels like. You know, founders or operators or people that are working in startup, what they go through. You know, where you have to all of your personal money, all of your personal finances, everything you have, you're literally putting it to ensure this dream or this vision comes alive. You know, and yeah, the team worked incredibly hard this year. You know, we did quite a lot. And I also kind of figured out, I think now one of the biggest things that I learned this year was being extremely focused. Again, a lot of people talk about it, but I think that it became a lot more clear for me this year. Um, the way I've seen a lot of people build companies or build products is actually like if you think about like um, coming from as an African, as a Nigerian, what you find is most people what we end up doing is we are trying to solve multiple problems, and it's also a function of because of the market, right? So customers don't have as much disposable income. So if you look at the products we build, the products do solve a lot of problems. So if you think, for instance, our banking apps sell internet, the data, DSTV. Yeah, they don't just do banking, right? And it has become almost ingrained in how we think about products. Where again, yeah, like I said, fundamentally it is a case of the customers you're selling to do not have as much disposable income, right? So your products end up doing 100 or 500 other things, just trying to sell as much as you can to that same customer audience. I think one big thing I learned this year was one, and this is for anybody that is innovating. Please, as you go into this new year, whatever you are trying to sell, whatever you are trying to, the biggest lesson I learned this year was sell to a customer audience that can afford your offering. It seems very simplistic, but again, sell to a market, sell to an audience that can afford what you are building. Period. I spoke to a friend of mine recently, and he sells health insurance to informal workers in the US. And he was telling me how they grew to $8 million in a single state. They don't, their service is not available across the world, across the country, but just in a single state, they've grown that to $8 million. And even for Radar, the longest time we were struggling. We were trying to sell. And I also realized that if you the moment you kind of figure out what your audience is and you're selling to a market that can pay you for what you're building, you realize that the sales effort and the journey changes. Right? It's no longer a function. There's no more. You don't have to force it. You're not trying to force the market to say, hey, here's our offering, here's why you should buy it. There's almost a natural inbound demand that again, which is also another thing, right? You need to be thinking about around being careful that growth does not kill the business. Right. But the biggest lesson for me was one, be crystal clear around what you offer and who you are selling to. But more importantly, sell to an audience that can pay you for what you are building. Whether it's a service, if you are selling, um, I don't care what it is, whether it's consulting service or whatever, find a niche, find a segment that can pay you the premium for the service that you offer. And I also realized that interestingly, what that has taught me as well is that most companies or most business owners don't know how to price for the offer or for the value that they provide. Right. Again, like I said, fundamentally driven because the market is poor. I think we all need to start accepting or being more comfortable with that reality that, especially if you're from a Nigerian standpoint, that most of that market is fundamentally poor. Not like a huge of the African market is poor. Poor from the context of willingness and ability to pay for quality service, right? We would rather spend and burn all our time and energy um, doing the work than paying for a solution, essentially, right? People would rather, and use a classic example, and I say, take a look at if you look at like a broader audience of people that you interact with, how many of them, most people would rather either like send their driver or use alternatives than using a service that will probably charge them an extra 2,000 naira, 3,000 naira for that convenience of getting the goods or products to them, right? So that starts helping you kind of get a deeper sense of how people value and think about spending for service. And there's obviously a small subset of people within the country that are paying that premium, but how large is that audience for you to build a business that you can be able to live off long term, right? So again, what I've learned now is I am only building products, so I'm only investing in products. Again, this year was also a very brutal year in investing. I saw a lot of the companies I invested in, um, great companies, great founders, but they struggled and struggled and struggled, most silently just closed shop without actually saying anything. For the ones that actually say, "Hey, we've tried or we've closed shop," at least thank you for telling me, or for being honest about that journey. It is a journey. It is not guaranteed. Um, as they'll tell you that 90% or even more than 90% of startups die. So you are already taking a very high risk pathway. For me, is what I've found now is that the biggest escape velocity for that is if you're a founder and you're building, or if you're thinking about starting a company or building a business, sell to a market that can pay you a premium for the innovation or for the value that you provide. Period. Everything else you're doing, if you're not doing that, is charity work. So decide and ask yourself a question. If I've done charity work in 2024, do I want to do charity in 2025? And it's not a bad thing if you want to do charity, but be very clear on that is what you're doing, right? But if you are trying to build a business that would, again, depending on whatever your ambitions or goals for that business, make you wealthy, take care of your stakeholders, which being like your employers, your team, your investors, take care of your family long term, then the biggest thing is sell in a market that can pay for the innovation or for the value that you're providing. If whatever you're building is offered in a market that cannot pay you for it, it's time to pause and reflect. And I think that a lot of the time, for even for like Radar, a lot of the time we actually, because again, I remember everybody was telling us, Radar, you have to go international, go start selling globally. And I was like, how? Like everybody's talking about it, but how? You know? And we did a lot of stuff. Again, hopefully in the coming weeks, we can talk about some of the things we've experimented, we've tried, and some of the things that have worked really, really well for us. But today, looking back, I'm really glad that it was being echoed, even though nobody was providing that playbook for what to do, because we took it as a challenge and just said, okay, we'll figure it out, we'll keep trying. And today, our biggest revenue comes from global companies using our offering, you know, and that for me is refreshing. You know, every month, uh, I'm no longer, again, if you're a startup founder, if you're doing an early stage company, you know what that fear when it gets to month ending to run payroll. You know, like, are we going to make payroll this month? No, because nobody in the business has to think about that. But if you're the CEO or you're a co-founder, you're a founder of a business or director, you're not doing all of the startup lingo. You're obviously thinking you have people to pay, you have bills to pay as a business. You know, how do we keep this business alive? And every month, those bills you need to think about them. So building and selling to an audience that can pay you for the innovation you're building, for me, is the most critical thing you can do. And if that is not happening already, do not delude yourself. Do not be, oh, it will get better, because sometimes we, it's great to, like, yes, to trust that things will get better, but again, I also believe that again you also need to take action. Even the Bible says he will bless the works of our hands. Like, you need to be, you need to be involved in the process. It's not just you are relaxed and hoping that it will just shall happen, you know. So think about what you're offering. Find a market, find an audience that values and understand what you're selling and go deep in that. And if that audience does not exist, maybe it's also to reevaluate the business. Again, we also made it very uncomfortable. And this is going to be another deep conversation around maybe actually next week. Maybe we should be talking about how we've actually made it uncomfortable for people to fail, right? Psychologically, we've made it a difficult conversation around failure. Failure is, again, what we term as failure is practically unaccepted. You know, um, growing up as kids as well, there's this sense of like if you did really bad in school, you want to hide it, like as opposed to yes, this is what it is, but how do you improve? And what did you learn from that experience? We treat it all as it's a very bad thing. You are not expected to fail. You are not allowed to fail. And if you are building a business, one of the biggest lessons you learn is, again, like I said, more than 90% of businesses will probably even die in the first year, in the first 2 years. So it means that if you survive more than in the first 2 years, congratulations, you're already an outlier because a lot of the same people that started with you at the same time, if it was a race, they are all dead, right? So think maybe use that to give yourself some consolation that it is a extremely, extremely field you are playing. You are probably even better off working in a larger company. But if you've caught the bug of building a young company, or you've caught the bug of working in a young company, again, another conversation for another day. Because again, people that come to work in startups have a very also needs to kind of also understand the dynamics of what a startup is. A startup is not a company. It's not a company in the sense of what a company is, right? For me, and people don't sometimes comes come to work in startup with the mindset of they want the experience that is expected in a corporate. Eventually, a startup matures to becoming a proper company and a corporate with structure, with process, with all of that. But in the early days, it is pure, unadulterated chaos. That's it. That's what you are joining, right? And if you do not know how to live, breathe, and survive in chaos, then probably working in a startup is not the place to be in. You know, I actually like that line. Ooh. But yeah, it is pure unadulterated chaos that you'll be interacting with, right? Things are changing at lightning speed, whether it's regulation, the business, what products you guys are selling, how you are selling it, all of that is changing. What your role is in the business is evolving. Whatever your job title is, you are probably doing 5 times, 10 times more than what is described in your job title. But again, if it is two things, right? Again, just to buttress a little bit around that, if it is for the companies that find escape velocity, it is the fastest way for you to grow and take on leadership role than like in the corporate world. Right? That's one of the reasons people like working in startup. But secondly, it's also one of the best ways to become extremely wealthy if the company finds that escape velocity and achieves that venture scale really, really quickly. You could move from being just okay to being extremely wealthy in a matter of a few years, right? You could move from being just I don't know, an operations assistant or whatever it is to becoming a CEO of a company within a 3 or 4 year pathway that you would have learned so much you have, and you can then actually shape and grow an organization in ways that is very different and very difficult to do in a large corporate, right? Again, being able to achieve that in 4 or 5 years in a corporate, maybe it's- there are outliers, but again, it's not the norm, right? Um, but yeah, again, I feel like those are some very, very set of conversations that um, we will be having, right? Conversations around how we have been groomed to see failing or not getting things right the first time as a bad thing. You know, where does that come from? How do we deal with that, right? Whether, especially if you are thinking about building a business or a company, then how do you navigate that, right? And being comfortable to say, hey, this business is not working. There's no point flogging a dead horse. It's not working. We've tried, we've experimented. What have we learned? Let's shut down the business gracefully and let's take stock of all of the learnings, all of the insights, and let's figure out what to do next with our lives, right? And again, it doesn't have to be even a business, right? We've seen people that you're doing, even in your career, you're working in an organization, you're in a career pathway, but you could already tell that this is not working, right? It's okay to then pause. The one thing you don't want to do is to continue that pathway and say, oh, you know what, it will get better, right? It's to actually be able to do that um, self-reflection and to take stock and say, hmm, if this is not really working, what do I want for my life? Right? Like I said, if it is your founder, you're building a company, then you're spending a huge amount of your life and your energy and your resource and your effort making this thing work. You want to ensure that you are pouring your energy in something that gives you um, the best pathway at success, whatever you define success to mean, you know. And if it is not working, whether as a founder and operator, um, being able to pause and reflect and say, it's fine, we've tried, it hasn't worked. This is why it hasn't worked. What did we learn from it? And then shutting that down gracefully and moving on with life, right? Because there's more to life than the business or career or the job you do. You know, there's actually a very also interesting conversation. I can see one of my good friends, AY. I'm actually going to see if I can get him to join the live stream next week, Saturday. And that we'll be talking about, and it is around identity. How we've also well defined our identity by the job we do or the business we lead or we build. You know, I found that to be very, very interesting. You see, now there's so many things to possibly talk about, but yeah, I'll love to hear. Again, maybe if not now, but please drop me a comment, send me a message. I'd love to hear which part you would like us to talk about in the coming week. But I've actually seen it that every single time you have a conversation, hi, my name is Francis, I am, and we go into exactly what we do for money. And we use that to describe and define who we are as a person. Um, that I think also is a very, very interesting conversation to have. How did that become all we define, or how all we, the story we tell someone that has never met us in the first 30 seconds or a minute? How did that become the story we tell of ourselves? You know? And I find it also to be very interesting because I've seen friends that have sold their company that have retired that then struggle because all of their identity was tied to the work that they did or the business that they founded. And now that they no longer had that, they became extremely depressed because all of their identity and who they are was tied to what they did. And for most people, they've not had any breathing space since they started working, maybe from 18, 20 years, and maybe they did that for 40 years of their life. And so when they eventually, again, for people that find escape velocity, sell off their business or retire, whatever the case is, then they become extremely depressed. Anyway, so yeah, that's my rant for today. I told myself I was going to do this, so for everyone that joined, thank you for joining. Hopefully it was useful. Hopefully you enjoyed yourself. Um, I'll keep doing this every Saturday. So please watch out. Saturday, 5 p.m. GMT, 6 p.m. West African time. But yeah, let me know what you thought about this episode, this new format. I didn't want to overthink it. I thought that the more I told myself, oh, I wanted to make it professionally done, I wanted to put a lot of structure in place, the more it didn't get to happen. So I was like, you know what? I've promised too many people in my life that I was going to get this thing down. So now let's not overthink it. Let's not put too many constraints to getting started. Let's just start. So this is starting. So cheers to starting. Let me know what you think of the episode. I know I rambled a little bit, so please forgive me. It's a journey. I'm also figuring this out myself. So let me know your thoughts. And let me know what you would like us to talk. I talked about a couple of things that I would like to explore, hopefully in the coming weekend. It will be obviously the holiday season. Yeah, um, everybody's enjoying and being merry, but let me know what you would like us to talk a little bit more around in the coming weekend. I have a couple of ideas in my head, and I probably have one or two people I want to drive in to join me in the conversation. Hopefully, that makes it a bit more exciting, so it's not just only me rambling for the entire time. But thank you so much. Really, really appreciate you spending your Saturday evening with me. Yeah, I don't know how the comments because I'm using like a multiple streaming experience. So this is available. It's being streamed now to Instagram and on YouTube, and in the coming days, probably in a few other um, channels or through other pathways. So I'm also getting a handle of the platform. So please, if you left comments and I didn't say it, I apologize. I'll try and get better at all of this. But please hit me up privately, send me a message, let me know what your thoughts are. And yeah, wishing you all a Merry Christmas, a happy holiday, and I'll see you this coming Saturday.